Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's our sweet, sweet prince. It's John Precoda.
How dare you? I am not the sweet, sweet prince. There is only one sweet, sweet prince, and we'll be talking about him in depth today.
That's right. This is a fan favorite. The people have been spamming the comments. They've been hitting our mentions. They want him. He's our international man of mystery. He's very handsome. He plays an incredible infield. And who is he at the plate and on the bases? We're going to find out a little bit more. It's Ha-Seong Kim. Ha-Seong Kim, Padres infielder, recent walk-off hero. And we are going to dive into who he is, both on the bases, at the plate, on defense, where he comes from, and of course we'll end the episode with our favorite question: what do we do with Ha-Seong Kim? So, with that in mind, let's meet the man. He is born on October 17th, 1995. Age 27 season this is for Ha-Seong Kim. He was born in Bucheon, South Korea, and he was a highly touted prospect coming out of high school in Korea, and he was drafted 41st overall by the Nexon Heroes, now the Kiwoom Heroes, in the 2014 KBO draft. Again, the teams in KBO, the first part of the name is a company that sponsors them, so that changes every now and then. So the Heroes are now sponsored by Kiwoom, and they were the Kiwoom Heroes when Ha-Seong Kim was playing for them. So we want to set the table before we start breaking down a little bit about Kim's stats, what the competition level is like in the KBO. Obviously, we've talked about the NPB when we talked in the Nick Martinez episode, Japanese Baseball League. Most evaluators peg it as a quad A league, meaning it's better than AAA, probably not as good as MLB. That's not to say that the talent there isn't incredible, but just for the context, if you want to, normalize the scales, talking about NPB, people see it as a quad A league. In a sort of similar manner, the KBO, according to Baseball America, and it's consistent across some other evaluators, they put the KBO somewhere between AA and AAA. So, the average KBO player could come here, probably do pretty well in AA, probably struggle in AAA. Just think about it in that sense. So, Ha-Seong Kim, he played for 7 seasons in the KBO, 6 of them full seasons. He kind of had equivalent of a cup of coffee in his age 18 season. He debuted as an 18-year-old in 2014 and went on to have an absolutely stellar, brief but stellar career in the KBO. Career 292 hitter over there. He hit 133 home runs with 575 RBI. He also won the Golden Glove Award, not the Gold Glove, but the Golden Glove in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Ran a lot, something we're going to talk about later in this episode. When he was in the KBO, he was stealing 20 to 30 bases a year consistently. And his final season, 2020, which it's worth pointing out, was not a COVID-shortened season in KBO because Korea was so locked down in the early part of COVID. They were able to play a full, it's not 162 games. I think it's somewhere in the range between 140 and 150 game season in Korea. But he had something like 600 plate appearances. So for all intents and purposes, it was a full season. Goes absolutely God tier in that season. Hits 306 with a 397 on base percentage, 523 slugging. We've talked about WOBA, weighted on base average, something we've mentioned a lot. Anything around 320 is average. Above that is above average. And, 360, you're getting into all-star territory. He had a 411 WOBA in Korea his final season. Over a whole season, he hit 30 home runs, 109 RBI, 21 stolen bases. This is, insane Mike Trout level production equivalent from Ha-Seong Kim in that last season over in the KBO. So that is the context in which AJ Preller, his hot 5-tool players' spidey senses tingling in the executive office at Petco Park. And December of 2020, we're still in lockdown. We've just finished the COVID-shortened season here. That is when Ha-Seong Kim was signed to the San Diego Padres, a deal that was worth at the time 4 years and $28 million guaranteed, plus a fifth-year mutual option, also at $7 million for that fifth year. And another thing to note, because he's an international player, of course, there's a posting system whereby the teams of origin in the original countries get a cut of the salary of a new MLB player. So $5 million on top of that contract also had to be paid to the Kiwoom Heroes. And, at the time, the talent evaluators love this deal. I think that the average fan didn't really know who this guy was and saw that the Padres were giving him somewhere on the order of $30 million. And I think understandably freaked out. So there are some comparisons of equivalent production in the KBO, MLB talent that we've been looking at, John.
Yeah, so when Preller made this deal, Fangraphs pretty much immediately came out with an article that had Zip's projections for Ha-Seong Kim over the next 5 years, or the 5 first years that he would be in the MLB, and they were glowing. They were great reviews. They said that he would get about 3.5 to 4 F-WAR per year over 5 years, which does not make sense for somebody that you would be paying $7 million a year. It's way too good. That's like a $20 million plus player. So looking at those, basically they said, oh, this is a shortstop who's going to hit 20 to 25 homers, having an OPS plus around 120, 20% higher than the major league average while playing shortstop. And interestingly, they thought that his defense would only be major league average or worse, and it was going to be his bat that was carrying him to those, nearly 4 WAR. And, I don't know much about defensive metrics in KBO. I know that he got the Golden Gloves, so I don't know if there are Hosmer-esque Golden Gloves that he's getting over there. I just didn't know. So I was a little bit concerned about that. Okay, we're signing a bat first player who's never played in the MLB. How's he going to adjust to the velocity and just like the scouting reports, everything, if he needs his bat to drive him? And at the time, the only frame of reference that I had was Eric Thames, who played in the KBO a few years before and had come to America in the year 2017. And he was insane in the KBO. When he was in the KBO, he was putting up ridiculous numbers. So in the years before he came to America, the 2015 and 2016 season, he hit 47 home runs and 40 home runs. His slash line in 2015 was 381, 497, 790, which are numbers that I struggle to produce when I'm playing Create a Player, John Precoda in MLB The Show, playing on easy. So that was good for a WRC plus of 216, 116% better than the average in the KBO at the time, which is insane, right? And then the next year, similarly good, 40 home runs, 321 average, 427 OBP, and 679 slugging. So he fell all the way down to a 165 WRC plus before he came to America.
Slipping.
And I know, slipping a little bit. And when he came to America, he was a good hitter. He that KBO project worked out for him. So he came to America, and his WRC pluses the next few years were 125, 106, and 116, which are good numbers. Not great numbers if you're not a defensive player, and he's not a great defensive player, but they were good numbers. It was a good transition. So then that's what my comparison was at the time for Ha-Seong Kim. And at the time, Ha-Seong Kim was putting up great numbers, but not Eric Thames level numbers in the KBO. He had WRC pluses closer to 140, which is still amazing, especially for a shortstop if he's giving you any defensive value at all. That being said, I didn't know that he had the defensive value that it turned out that he ended up having. So I didn't know that his bat would translate quite as well as it ended up translating.
So a couple things there. First of all, this is the second podcast in a row you've brought up Eric Hosmer. So I don't know if you're having some sort of separation anxiety or like really missing him or something, but I understand. I'm also just loving the idea of there being some guys like in South Korea who are like on sports talk radio over there arguing about like the leadership that you get from 3 gold gloves. So I'm just going to hang on to that. So Ha-Seong Kim comes over here and, $7 million a year. It's not expensive, but it's not cheap. There's a certain level of expectation that's come on him. And he gets to the Padres, the Jace Tingler-led 2021 San Diego Padres, that were full of hopes and dreams and saw themselves pitching Jake Arrieta and Vince Velasquez down the stretch. And Ha-Seong Kim, at the time, he's backing up, essentially, Fernando Tatis Jr., who's still playing shortstop at this time, and then sort of rotating into all the other parts of the infield. And remember, the NL didn't have the DH yet this year. And there was some talk in the CBA of like, are they going to institute it in 2021? We don't know. And this was a signing that was very much in mind of if the Padres got a DH, similar to Jurickson Profar and that idea of like, okay, he's going to give us some sort of flexibility. And the result was he got really shortchanged on plate appearances when he got here. He didn't have a lot of playing time. He only had 298 plate appearances in that rookie season of 2021, and the numbers are not good. He hit 202 with a 270 on-base percentage, slugged 352. And remember, this is a guy in Korea who was hitting 30 homers a year, and he's coming over here and struggling. His WOBA was 270. His WRC plus was a 70. So if you think last year Trent Grisham was an 81 WRC plus, it's 11% worse than that. So bad. Still managed to put up with those abysmal offensive numbers in limited playing time. Half of a win, 0.5 WAR, which gets into how valuable he is defensively, and that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. 2022 happens. Fernando Tatis Jr. rides a motorcycle. The rest is history. And now there's a opening at starting shortstop for the San Diego Padres. Ha-Seong Kim fills in there. And the turnaround was absolutely remarkable once he started to get some playing time. He, first of all, hit 251 with a 325 on base, slugged 383. Again, not the power guy that he was in Korea, but it was still good enough for a 313 WOBA, which last year, that's a 105 WRC plus. Again, this was the deadened ball year that was 2022. And mind you, he's an above average, barely, but above average bat playing an incredible shortstop. Absolutely consistent, 8 outs above average. It was good for 3.7 F-WAR last year. And just to put that into context, Jeremy Pena, obviously the kind of breakout for the Houston Astros, went on to win the World Series last year, young kid shortstop. I think he put up 3.5. So Ha-Seong Kim was deemed more valuable to the Padres than Jeremy Pena was to the Astros last year. So Elvis Andrus, who was traded in the middle of the year but still also had an excellent season, still less valuable than Ha-Seong Kim in 2022. Some interesting things of that season. He had a really good performance against lefties over righties. When I looked at the stats, I was actually kind of surprised. I remember him having a much bigger platoon advantage, but the difference was a 765 OPS against lefties and a 681 against righties. And also, he's low-key really fast. It's something that we don't talk about and don't see super often. But he was a 79th percentile sprint speed last year, which is faster than D. Gordon, who's someone I pretty much exclusively associate with speed. So it's kind of shocking looking back at those StatCast numbers. And, of course, if you watch Ha-Seong Kim and you were looking at the eye test, probably the number one thing that you saw, John, was that he really struggled with velocity.
Yes, he did. So there's 2 things that I kind of want to talk about next in this next portion of the podcast, and that is One, you brought up his speed, and two, you brought up his failure to succeed against velocity. So I'm going to start off with his speed, just because I find this to be endlessly amusing. So 80th percentile in speed. He's been very efficient on the bases. He's had 18 steals in 21 attempts, which is good for 85.7%, well above that like cutoff that folks usually give you, which is around 75% to make stolen base worthwhile. But in reality, there are break-even points that are dependent on the situation in which you steal. So break-even points are suggesting that at this point it is okay, like it is exactly the same amount of value if you stole or you didn't at this percentage. When you're able to steal with 2 outs, second base, you are providing more value to your team than you would be if you had 1 out or 0 outs. And that's because with 2 outs, it just takes a single to get you home. And every batter only has that, 1 out to get that 1 single. Whereas with 1 out or 0 outs, you have a couple chances to get a single, you have a couple chances to get a double, you have a couple chances to get a triple, you have a couple chances to get a home run. And so getting out is more of a penalty than when there's with 1 out. So the numbers are as such. It's essentially that when you have 2 outs, if you are able to steal at a 70% or higher rate, then you are helping your team. About 70% when there's 2 outs. When there's 1 or 2 outs, then it becomes closer to 75, 76-ish% depending on the year and the run scoring environment of that given year. But good cutoffs tend to be with 2 outs. You want to be a little bit more aggressive. You only need to get in there 70% of the time to be efficient. And with 1 outs or 0 outs, closer to 75 plus. So like I said, he stole bases at an 85.7% rate, which is very good, well above that cutoff, which to me suggests that he should probably be stealing more because he's way above that cutoff in terms of providing efficient value to his team, but he's not stealing enough bases given his speed. And as you said, he's 80th percentile in speed, faster than D. Gordon. People that are in his kind of range with the same sprint speed are Cedric Mullins, for example, who I associate with incredible speed. Dansby Swanson, who maybe you don't think about as fast, but he is pretty fast. Jose Ramirez, very fast. Steven Kwan was successful on the bases last year. So these are fast folks, and all of them stole many more bases than Ha-Seong Kim did last year. Mullins got 34 bags stolen, Jose Ramirez 20, Swanson 18, Steven Kwan 19, and Ha-Seong Kim only got those 12 steals. And so I was wondering why he steals less. And I was trying to figure out maybe there's some reason. And if you look into, they on StatCast are able to divide how fast you are based on how far you are into the between 0 and 90 feet. And it does seem as though Ha-Seong Kim's acceleration is slightly slower than, say, a Jose Ramirez, for example. He's able to reach his peak speed quicker than Ha-Seong Kim is. But by the end of the 90 feet, he's getting there pretty efficiently. He should probably steal more than he does. And looking at the Padres roster as a whole, basically all the players that are returning are stealing at a rate that is more efficient than that 75% mark and should thus probably be attempting more steals. Jake Cronenworth only stole 3 bases last year. He was never caught stealing. Manny Machado, 9 stolen bases, caught stealing 1 time. Trent Grisham, 7 stolen bases, only caught stealing 1 time. Ha-Seong Kim, 12 stolen bases, only caught stealing 2 times. Jurickson Profar, who's now gone, 5 stolen bases, 1 caught stealing. These are numbers that suggest that we should probably just be stealing more in general, and his foot speed shows that he should probably be stealing more in general. So that those 12 stolen bases, when you compare them to his 25, 30 bags that he was getting in the KPO, to me, he should be getting closer to 20 stolen bases, which would then provide more base running value and overall value for the Padres as a team and for him as a player when it comes to his WAR values.
So let's talk about what happened when Ha-Seong Kim came from the KBO into Major League Baseball and try and kind of explain the hitting breakdown in that first season and how things have improved since. So it's worth pointing out when he was in his final season in the KBO, he was putting the ball all over the field. His pull percentage was 43.9%, was hitting it up the middle 37.4%, and was going oppo at an 18.7% clip. Now, when he got to the U.S. in that first season, he started to try to pull the ball like crazy. And it's understandable, right? You know, this is part of the revolution of the game, the modern game. Pull the ball, put it in the air. But it was not effective for him. So he pulled the ball at a 50.7% clip in that 2021 season. And unfortunately for him, his home run to fly ball rate basically cut in half from the KBO to the U.S. So you were seeing a big reduction in power there. And in 2022, his profile looked a lot more like his last season of the KBO than it did his first season of the U.S. So like I mentioned, his final season of the KBO pulled the ball 43.9%. In 2022, he pulled the ball 46.5%. The other thing I want to point out, KBO 2020, 18.7% going the opposite way. It was back up to 17.5% in 2022. So we're seeing him, again, maybe a little bit of recognition that he's not going to be the slugger that he was in Korea, and say, okay, I'm going to play the ball where it's pitched. Outside pitches, I'm going to wait on it a little bit, try and, usher it into the opposite field, which shows a maturity there that I think comes with time. Now, part of this, I think, bumpy transition was, remember, in the KBO, this guy was like Manny Machado in terms of, his final 2 seasons of production from a WRC perspective, maybe a shade below it, but, putting up consistently a 140 WRC plus, it's, all-star levels. He wasn't used to being challenged as much. He was someone who was incredibly patient at the plate. His last season in Korea, he walked more than he struck out. And basically what happened was in 2021, his first strike percentage absolutely skyrocketed. So he went down 0-1 54.1% of the time in the KBO. And in 2021, that number went up to 68.5%. So this is someone, again, who liked to work walks, who liked to be patient, who all of a sudden was getting hit with a reality check that he's facing much higher velocity, and he's being challenged by those pitchers. So for me, and again, and also in 2022, that number kind of sank back down a little bit to 62%, and so far in 2023, small sample size, but it is declining. So the most intriguing thing for me to watch for Ha-Seong Kim going forward is whether or not pitchers continue to attack Ha-Seong Kim early in the count with fastballs, and if so, will he adjust and kind of try and, again, force the pitchers to adjust and have that kind of constant back and forth tennis match that we see between hitters and pitchers that we love so much in the game. And John, I know that there was some numbers as well about how his pull percentage was also affecting his ground balls.
Yeah, the pull percentage and velocity. So I'm going to touch on both of those right now. And like you said that last year he was more willing to take a ball the opposite way or up the middle. That's true, he was. But those were almost exclusively on line drives or fly balls. On ground balls, you'll see this on the YouTube video, not on the podcast, but let me just tell you, every ground ball he hit was pretty much to the left side. There was about 4 that went to the right side of the like to where a second baseman and a first baseman might be, but everything else was a pull. And he was yanking balls on the ground, and that showed up in his splits between having a shift against him and not having a shift against him. So in the 22% of the time that he had a full-blown like right-handed shift against him, he had a WOBA of 240, and when there was no shift, he had a WOBA of 334. Now, that's a small sample size, but that's a wild sample size. That's 100 points difference. And that's very likely, at least in part, due to the fact that anytime he hits a ball on the ground, he's pulling it. And those balls have no chance to sneak through if you have a shift on. And he's not going to be facing the shift anymore. So there's at least hope in that portion of his profile that when he yanks a ball on the ground, it might slip through once in a while when there's no shift. It's one of those things that you normally think about with left-handed hitters, but he is so predominantly pull heavy when he hits the ball on the ground that I would imagine that he's going to have a great benefit in the post-shift era. Now, that's one thing. Like, I think that that's going to be the case. I think that he's going to pull more balls through a 5.5 hole or up the middle that'll be singles. Another thing that has plagued him has been velocity so far in his career, and he's shown a level of improvement. And I think that it's a very common thought process after looking at his numbers from, without doing a deep dive into them, that he last year improved dramatically against the fastball as compared to 2 years ago. And that is true. So against the fastball in the year 2021, he had a WOBA of 292. And once again, 320 is what we're saying is average. He was 292, well below average against the fastball. In 2022, he pops up to 318, which is, right near average. Not really near average for against a fastball, but for average against any pitch in general, which at the least shows a huge improvement, right? That 292 to 318 jump is a remarkable jump against the fastball. And that's usually what people are quoting are those kinds of numbers. Oh, he's better against the fastball now. He's better against the fastball now. And he is. But what really ended up happening was that he showed a dramatic improvement against a little bit slower fastballs and still struggles against the fast fastballs. So when against any pitcher, right-handed or left-handed, when a pitch was thrown 95 miles per hour or faster against Ha-Seong Kim in the year 2022, last year, he had a 194 WOBA, 95 plus, 194. 194. That is amazingly bad. It was worse on the team amongst any player that had any significant amount of at-bats. That's just really, really bad. 194. Now, any fastball that was 94 miles per hour or lower, suddenly he's literally one of the best fastball hitters in the game or on our team. He had a 389 WOBA against fastballs that were below 95 miles an hour. And you say, oh, yeah, that's true. But any fastball below 95 miles an hour is a bad fastball, so probably everybody's smoking it. Not true at all. He had amongst players that were playing for us constantly, or at least at a high rate, he basically led the team. There was a couple people that were higher than him. Will Myers in a short sample size, Jorge Alfaro in a small sample size. But Manny Machado, for example, had a 344 WOBA against fastballs 94 miles an hour or lower. And Ha-Seong Kim had a 389 WOBA against the same sample size, And when you do any pitch below 95, you brought up the splits and you said they weren't as dramatic as you thought. The splits are dramatic, but they're not right-handed versus left-handed. Right-handed versus left-handed, he has a career 123 WRC plus, 23% better against left-handed pitchers, and 96 WRC plus against right-handed pitchers, which is slightly below average. That's a 20% plus jump. That's the difference. But let's look at his jump against all pitches above 95 miles per hour and all pitches below 95 miles an hour. So as I said, any pitch, sinker, fastball, sinker, four-seam fastball, cutter. Some pitchers like Corbin Burns can throw a cutter that's above 95 miles an hour. 194 WOBA against literally any pitch, including all the nasty breaking balls that are in the league nowadays that everybody else has a terrible WOBA against. Any pitch below 95 miles per hour, he had a 341 WOBA. 341 against any pitch below 95 miles per hour, which was second best on the team to Manny Machado. So suddenly, if you have any pitcher that's right-handed or left-handed who's throwing below 95 miles per hour, he is literally a middle-of-the-order type hitter. That's not what I think of him as, but like if you throw out, like, for example, today we faced Zach Gallen. Zach Gallen's a great pitcher. He doesn't throw above 95 miles per hour. Should we be batting Ha-Seong Kim ninth in the lineup, or should we be batting him higher up? I would argue that we should be batting him higher up. Even against right-handed pitchers that are throwing below 95 miles per hour, he has a 328 WOBA against right-handed pitchers who are throwing below 95 miles per hour. All pitches. So nasty right-handed pitchers, he can hit everything except that four-seam velocity. So once I dug into those numbers, I thought, oh man, if you use him properly, if you do the splits based basically just on four-seam velocity, you could create a player that is well above average at the plate as well as amazing on defense, which we'll talk about later. That's a very, very valuable player. Like, if you have enough depth to sit him once in a while against the matchups that are not good for him, which are only about 12% of pitchers are constantly throwing fastballs, above 95 miles per hour, then you can get his numbers skyrocketing. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm surprised, to be honest. Like, this is super good data that you're pulling, especially just pitches that are in general below 95 miles an hour. I definitely wouldn't have thought that because, I think the conventional wisdom, which probably has some water to it, which is he was struggling to come over from Korea where they just don't have guys that throw 96 and above on a consistent basis. And, I think that was like the talk radio line, but also like probably true. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I hated that criticism because it was just such an easy way to write him off at first, but like also probably a little bit true. But I'm really intrigued by this idea of you can actually play Ha-Seong Kim like 85% of the time against anyone at the plate. And then as long as you don't force him into that 15%, he's like going to be incredibly successful. You know what I mean? And mind you, just because of off days and whoever's healthy and positional versatility, he might be forced to play in those situations where he just goes up against a flamethrower and looks a little bit lost. But I feel good about Ha-Seong Kim playing under a manager like Bob Melvin, who I think has absolutely no qualms about using a platoon split when necessary. And we're seeing it this year so far with, David Dahl being taken out for Jose Azocar or, Matt Carpenter. I can't remember what I said in the other podcast. Mattson Carpenter or something like that. Just like whatever that platoon split is working out pretty decently so far. You know what I mean? So obviously, this is data that the Padres have. I would be really curious if we see them actually start to deploy this a little bit. And, when we go up against, I don't know, a Dustin May type who's going to be throwing gas with crazy wicked movement, if they give Kim the day off and then bring him in later in the game as a defensive replacement and then move him up in the lineup as they're facing someone like a Zach Davies, for instance, who's, going to try and induce that soft contact, but Ha-Seong Kim could definitely match up against. Super, super interesting stuff. And I'm really curious about what you've pulled up about plate discipline.
Yeah, so this was just another curiosity for me. I had noticed that we have a little bit of a stars and scrubs roster build. Like, that's what AJ Preller has done. And I'm certainly not calling Ha-Seong Kim a scrub. Not at all. However, he's not one of the constructed stars at the top of our lineup, at least at the plate. And so it seems as though AJ Preller's strategy is something like get stars, put them at the top of your order, and then towards the bottom of your order, plate discipline suddenly becomes a little bit more important. Folks that can see a lot of pitches per plate appearance and just kind of wear out a pitcher before you pop over to the top of the order, and then, those guys can go at that guy. So bottom of the order, dudes like Trent Grisham, Ha-Seong Kim, Jurickson Profar last year. Those are all dudes that see a lot of pitches per plate appearance. And they all do it in completely different manners. So Trent Grisham just doesn't swing in general. Hates to swing. He just likes to stand up there mostly and make sure everybody can see him. He's a good-looking guy. Never chases at all. He doesn't chase. Part of his problem is that he's not as aggressive as he probably should be, and hopefully he'll be changing that this year. We'll see. But that's kind of what drives his pitches per plate appearance, is that he just watches balls. He doesn't swing at anything unless it's a strike. And so you got to throw him at least 3 strikes in order to get him out. And so that'll drive up your pitches per plate appearance, right? Just so everybody knows, normal pitches per plate appearance is something like 3.9. So if you can be above 4 pitches per plate appearance, you're doing well. And Ha-Seong Kim is doing well. He's last year was about 4.05, which is above the league average, like I said, of about 3.9. So he sees a lot of pitches. And Trent Grisham sees 4.23. Jurickson Profar saw 4.23. Jurickson Profar did it in a very different manner. So Jurickson Profar doesn't chase a lot, but he doesn't have Trent Grisham's eye. What he does is he wastes pitches with the best of them. So if you put a ball on the corner of the plate, he's going to swing at it, he'll make contact, and he'll foul a ball off. And Trent Grisham isn't as good at that. He's just not really good at that in general, partially because he doesn't have the hand-eye coordination of some of these other players that I'll be talking about. Jurickson Profar has great hand-eye coordination. He can make contact with basically anything, but he also has the ability to foul pitches off. Ha-Seong Kim also has great hand-eye coordination. He can make contact with just about anything. However, his problem is that when he does chase, which he doesn't chase a lot, he chases much below league average, but when he does chase, he puts the ball in play. And that's disadvantageous for a player, because when you chase and you put the ball in play, you're normally putting the ball in play poorly. And whereas Jurickson Profar would just foul a ball off, Ha-Seong Kim puts it in play. And so that costs him. That costs him both in terms of value at the plate, in terms of how hard he's hitting the ball, and also in terms of how many pitches he sees. Because, he's not just fouling balls off and getting them deep in the count. He basically has to see a ball and he won't swing at it. Or if he does swing at it, shoot. That's, at bat over. So he, like I said, he's slightly above average, not slightly, pretty well above average in terms of pitches per plate appearance. But he has that skill that he could possibly work on. He has great hand-eye coordination and a good eye, a really good eye. If he could start fouling balls off in a manner that Jurickson Profar could, he could start driving, pitches per plate appearance way through the roof. And just to drive home the point that it does seem like A.J. Preller is going for this towards the end of the lineup, Matt Carpenter, ooh boy, you're going to see. He is amazing at pitches per plate appearance. Largely because he doesn't swing like Trent Grisham, but also folks are a little bit more scared of him than they are of Trent Grisham, so they don't want to throw him a pitch down the heart of the plate. He sees 4.3 pitches per plate appearance over the course of his career, which is amazing. Just if 3.9 is average, and you get up to the 4.2 percentage for like Jurickson Profar, and we've all seen Jurickson Profar. He sees a lot of pitches. 4.3 is crazy high, and it's been only getting higher and higher as his career has gone on. So, last year for the Yankees, it was 4.72.
Almost a full pitch, above league average, basically.
Yeah,
yeah.
A pitch above league average. 4.72 is like bonkers amount of pitches per plate appearance. And it's one of the reasons why I'm slightly excited about the potential for Matt Carpenter, what he will do for the lineup. But we'll talk about that in a later episode, I would imagine. But either way, it does sound like the end of the lineup is folks that tend to see more pitches, and they'll tire out a pitcher, and then you got somebody working to get through some outs, and then suddenly you see Tatis, he's ready to swing. That dude will swing at a ball, so you better be careful with Tatis. And then Soto, who will work you again. Manny Machado loves to swing. Xander Bogaerts can obviously do a ton of damage. It's a good lineup construction in my opinion, and I think Kim 1 has a potential to do a little bit better than he than he even has been doing, which has also been good. But if used properly, now he's damaging and exhausting towards the end of the lineup. We're going to talk about his defense next. You put that guy at the bottom of a lineup, it's a valuable dude.
Yeah. So you mentioned his defense, and we're going to keep this first part brief just because we talked a little bit about it in the Xander Bogaerts episode. But if you haven't listened to that, by the way, go back, watch it, listen to it, everything like that, because there's some useful information for what we're going to talk about here regarding outs above average. But the important thing to know for Ha-Seong Kim is that he tied for 8th in Major League Baseball last season across shortstops in terms of outs above average. He had 8 outs above average, which, again, is worth about 6 runs prevented, which if you'll remember from that Xander Bogaerts episode is about 3/4 of a win. So in the plus column for his defense, very valuable. And ahead of him are some of the stars of the game, of course, your Dansby Swansons, your Francisco Lindors, but also some guys who are really glove-first shortstops. Willie Adames, Jorge Mateo, Miguel Rojas, Nick Allen on the A's. From my alma mater, I'm wearing the shirt, Francis Parker, go Lancers. The fact that Ha-Seong Kim is incorporating a league average bat along with well above league average defense shows you why he's so valuable. And again, not to pick at a scab, but Xander Bogaerts, not as strong. The arm is not as good as Ha-Seong Kim's. Specifically moving to his right, moving to the third base side. I remember Xander is like a negative 26 career outs above average when that weak arm is exposed. Ha-Seong Kim, by contrast, above average pretty much everywhere. Moving in, moving back, moving to his left, moving to his right. Not putting up those like Dansby Swanson quite levels of 20 plus outs above average in a season, but he doesn't really have a weakness in his game at shortstop, which again is certainly in the infield the most premium defensive position. And that brings us to the question of value and positional value, because Ha-Seong Kim is no longer playing shortstop for the San Diego Padres. The job belongs to Xander Bogaerts. And we can relitigate that argument this episode. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the numbers behind what that might cost the Padres in terms of value for Ha-Seong Kim. So Zip's depth charts, which again we talked about last episode, is a projection system from Fangraphs, and they basically incorporate Ha-Seong Kim's projections going forward, but taking into account the fact that he's now playing at second base. So whereas Zips projected Ha-Seong Kim to be worth 3.4 FWAR this season if he had continued to play shortstop, which is, again, very, very valuable. Jeremy Pena last year, about 3.4 FWAR. You take that every time. It now projects him to be worth 2.9 FWAR. So about half of a win in production from moving from shortstop to second base. And to put that in perspective, last year Trevor Story for the Red Sox at second base was worth 2.4 FWAR, and Jace Peterson, who I think was on the Brewers last year, but the point being that he kind of struggles to kind of get a job, was worth 1.9 FWAR. So that's your half a win difference right there. And it might not sound like a lot, but going from Trevor Story to Jace Peterson is quite the step down. Trevor Story, by the way, gets $23 million a year on the open market. Jace Peterson last year gets $4.5 million. So that's what we're dealing with here. So moving forward, looking at his Zips projections, 2023, like I mentioned, 3.4 FWAR if he stuck at shortstop. So kind of keeping that, if he had stayed at shortstop, 2024, he'd be worth 3.2 FWAR projected. 2025, 3.1. That's about lockstep with, again, I can't bring him up, but he was an incredible player last year, Jeremy Pena. So if we are going to continue and have Ha-Seong Kim at second base, and you want to look at what that might cost the Padres going forward, you look at someone who's projected for a 2.8, 2.9 F4 at second base, it's someone like a Ryan McMahon on the Colorado Rockies, who is, again, a great player. Would love to have him on my team, don't get me wrong, but he's not Jeremy Pena. And by moving Ha-Seong Kim from shortstop to second base, you're turning Jeremy Pena into Ryan McMahon. And that's the kind of question about what we should do going forward with Ha-Seong Kim, John.
Yeah, so I think it's time we brought back another Marry Fuck Kill for a Padres player, because we have 2 years, this year and next year, for Ha-Seong Kim under contract. 27-year-old season, 28-year-old season, each about $7 million per year. It'll cost him $7 million in annual average value, and then he'll be a free agent at the age of 29. So, Marry Fuck Kill. We're talking about signing Ha-Seong Kim long-term, like we just did Jake Cronenworth, like we have to Xander, like we have to Manny Machado, like we have to Fernando Tatis Jr., or keeping him for the 2 years at a very low price and then saying, the market has, outstripped our ability to pay for you. You can head to wherever you would like. Or to trade him. And the argument for trading him would probably be that we just signed Cronenworth for a bajillion years for a lot of money, and that second base job might, if he has to play second base and he's not maximizing his value, why not just put Cronenworth there and let Matt Carpenter or someone that we can trade for easily cover first base? Would you like me to go first in my thoughts?
Yeah,
or
go
did you
first.
wanna
Go first, and then I'll finish up.
Okay. So, first I'm going to, as always, give the information first and then my opinion second. And that is that I think that Ha-Seong Kim is going to cost a lot of money on an open market. He, like you said, he's, according to Zip's projections, likely to put up in the 3 to 4 WAR amounts over the next 3 years, according to their projections. And, that's what he was worth last year. Last year, he was worth 3.5 WAR. That's a valuable player. That's closer to a $20 million player than it is to a $7 million player. And I put a comparison in terms of free agent prices, and it was Trevor Story, which I'm glad you brought up. So Trevor Story, he had 6 years for the Colorado Rockies before he hit free agency at the age of 29, which is exactly the age that Ha-Seong Kim will be hitting free agency. And he averaged 3.55 F4 per year over those 6 years. And honestly, it was mostly one 6.3 F4 a year that really dominated his numbers and made him overall look great. And I don't know that Ha-Seong Kim has that, 6.3 F4 season in him. Maybe he does, but he does have the 3.5 WAR likelihood over a long period of time, especially at the shortstop position. And like you said, he's probably being cost about half a WAR just by going to second base. We've brought up in the past that we think that a market inefficiency is maybe being nice to your players. It doesn't seem like we're being nice to Ha-Seong Kim in this situation. I mean, he's going to be hitting an open market at the age of 29, and we're reducing his value by putting him at second base. And if it's for 2 years that we're putting him in second base, I don't know that that's the case. It might be that he switches back to shortstop at some point. But if it is for 2 years that we're keeping him at second base, now he's hitting the age 29 season going to free agency, and I don't even know if he's a shortstop. I haven't seen it in 2 years. So not only is he less valuable on an open market to a team because he's putting up less F-WAR because his positional value is less, and his bat, it'll play for a second baseman, but it's not as amazing as it is at shortstop. But I haven't seen it. I haven't seen him play shortstop for 2 years. Do I want to pay somebody who I haven't seen play shortstop for 2 years to come play shortstop for my ball club? I don't know. I'm at least taking some money off before I'm signing him. And that's what it seems like we're doing to Ha-Seong Kim. And I don't know. Maybe we're being nice to Xander in order to, that's what drew him to San Diego. We were able to say, we'll let you play shortstop. But Xander signed for a long time. He doesn't need what does he need? Who he's not going to be a free agent for anybody. He's going to be 41 years old when he hits the market. That's forever from now. He doesn't need like the positional value. None of this helps him. Whereas it would help Ha-Seong Kim a lot on an open market, and it would help our team. So I don't understand what the reasoning is. I would hope that at some point he gets back at the shortstop, just for him as a human being that we all love and like want to root for, so he can make more money on the open market. But so I was comparing him to Trevor Story, who I think compares favorably in terms of value, although doesn't have quite the like. Ha-Seong Kim probably doesn't have the star appeal that Trevor Story did, especially with when Trevor Story had that 6.3 F4 season. But overall, I think over a long period of time, they have similar value. And Trevor Story signed a 6-year, $140 million contract, which is obviously a lot. I think that's more than you would, if you polled a bunch of Padres fans, I think that's more than you would say that most people would say that Ha-Seong Kim would sign for. And even if we signed him soon, it would be a little bit less than that, just because the next 2 years we have him at a good value at $7 million per year. So you'd have to take off whatever's the difference for those 2 years. But still, we're still talking more than, a 4-year, $100+ million extension. I don't think that most Padres fans, even though they love Ha-Seong Kim, would immediately jump to the $100+ million in terms of how much they'd be willing to give to him. But I think that might be what he's worth on an open market. So if you're asking me how would I use him, I would be very inclined to, really what I would do is move him to shortstop. But okay, what I was saying, we have to keep him at second base because of Xander for whatever reason. I would use him for the 2 years at $7 million per year, get extraordinary value out of that, and then hope that he signs for less. But if he doesn't, then I can't give him over $100 million when we already have like a bajillion infielders on our roster, and like he barely makes sense in terms of the roster calculus, and I'm just throwing another $100 million at him. That doesn't seem reasonable to me. So what am I doing? I'm fucking him in this situation, which would be nice for everybody involved. He's a beautiful man, but that's my only choice, I think, at the rate that I expect him to sign for.
Yeah, I'm gonna bury the lead on mine a little bit, just because I agree with you. I'm also fucking Ha-Seong Kim. First of all, who wouldn't? And second of all, it's kind of the only possible answer in my opinion, for a couple reasons. You already outlined the Mary possibility in great length, so I'm not gonna talk about signing an extension to him. It would be expensive. He deserves to get paid. I'm happy for him when he does do that. You can't trade him either, and here's why. He's incredibly versatile. He played third base today. We've seen him play third base in the past. He's playing second base. He's playing shortstop. But also, he plays a really important role in the transition from the 2023-2024 Padres, who are by the way, the go for it Padres, which is another reason you can't trade him. You'd be weakening the team, and these are the go for it years. This is why we're signing these crazy long contracts with dead money at the end of them. It's so that these next 2 years, while you have Juan Soto for sure, you are going for it. It also takes the pressure off of Jackson Merrill to develop quickly. And that's the reason why I love that Ha-Seong Kim is here for 2 more years. And by the way, he has a mutual option for $7 million in 2025. He's not going to accept it, but it's just worth noting that we're going to give it to him. He's going to say no. And it takes the pressure off of Jackson Merrill. He can come up in 2025, have lots of time to develop. He's someone I so badly want to see play for the Padres because, how rare is it that the Padres actually develop young talent that they get to have for 6 years at cheap cost control? It would be so cool. He obviously also complements this lineup quite well, being a bat to ball contact type of player who can also play up the middle, can play shortstop when, God willing, Xander Bogaerts transitions to second base. And, this is something small to note. It's not super important, I think, in factoring into the decision, but he's probably a qualifying offer candidate, Ha-Seong Kim, that he'll decline. And that also gives another a valuable pick for AJ Preller, who obviously is a draft god, and will help, bring up the farm system. And if you trade him away, obviously trades are so, well, would you trade him? Well, yeah, it depends on what I'm getting back. You know what I mean? Of course, if I'm getting Garrett Cole back, sure, whatever. You know what I mean? It's not happening. So in that context, you know you're going to get a qualifying offer level player when he leaves, and that in and of itself provides value as well. So John and I are in agreement. We're having a beautifully romantic time with Ha-Seong Kim. We will treat him well, and we will send him on his way after 2024. Anything else you want to add on Ha-Seong Kim before we get out of here?
Yeah, just me listening to you explain your reasoning still made me feel a little bit hostile towards you, because God, do I love Ha-Seong Kim, and you're just gonna let him go after 2 years? What are you doing? Like,
I know.
I'm hitting you up in the comment section saying, this is insane. You can't let Ha-Seong Kim go. Because, damn, I would miss Ha-Seong Kim a lot. I love that guy. He's, fan favorite, just lovable guy that I would just hate to have on any other team in any other uniform. Why are you in those colors? You got to be a Padre for life. But I can't in good conscience say anything else besides that, yeah, we got to use him. And then you can't sign 6 infielders for $100 million plus.
No.
Right? I don't think you can.
No. Yeah, for now, this podcast is not called Pods Above Vibes and not called Pods Above Looks. Otherwise, Ha-Seong Kim would be a 20-year extension candidate. But it is Pods Above Replacement, and for that reason, we're going to enjoy Ha-Seong Kim in our time while we have him. Don't be sad it's over. Be happy that it happened, John. This has been a great episode of Pods Above Replacement. Once again, you can become a Padres Hot Tub patron and get all of the perks of being a member, including access to our wonderful Discord community where John and I frequent and arguably probably spend too much time, but here we are. And we have a Pods Above Replacement channel there that you can talk directly with us, talk to other fans of the show, subscribe to our YouTube, Padres Hot Tub, this coming week on YouTube. It's going to be a great day. And, we are going to have continue to have YouTube only content. John's been pumping out some YouTube shorts, which I know some of the broader community have been enjoying. I'm going to hop on that train as well. So for today, my name is Raphie Cantor. For John Precoda, thanks everyone.